Imagine this, you live in 18th century London, you've been on a recent hunting trip and managed to shoot yourself in the foot with an arrow. Don't know how that happened, but please be more careful next time. So you head over to the local apothecary and the doctor hands you an ointment. The doc tells you not only will it heal your wound, but it'll bring you power and vitality. You ask the doctor what this vile smelling concoction is, and he tells you it's essence of mummy. Huh? What's essence of mummy, you ask? We are going to find out today. But first, welcome to Creepy Cassetti, your place for horror in reality and beyond. I am your host, Dee, and if this sort of content interests you, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell so you'll know every time I drop another video. Also check the description box because now I have socials. I am available currently on Facebook and Instagram, and there is an upcoming TikTok, but I'm putting that one off because I actually plan on making short video compilations for that, so stick around for that. Anyway, back to the question. What is essence of mummy? Well, it's actually kind of icky. See, doctors would unravel and boil mummy remains in an oil to create this ointment, or they would crush up parts of the body to create mummy powder. While the ointment was used as a means of patching severe wounds, fractures, and internal organs, mummy powder was used to treat an abundance of ailments. Why, might you ask? Well, they'd already been using body parts for medicine since the 12th century. They believed that like treated like, so if you had a migraine, you'd use crushed skull to correct the problems. Sounds legit, I guess. They believed they would be imbued with the power of the deceased. Artists even found some value in the mummies with a color called mummy brown, which is made with myrrh, white pitch, and ground mummies, both humans and cats. Mumia comes from the Arabic word Mumia, which comes from the Persian word mum, meaning wax. The substance was originally obtained from the mountains of Darabgerd in Persia. Egyptians of the 12th dynasty started using the mumia or bitumen in the embalming process. Just a note, I might switch between mumia and bitumen. Just know we are talking about the same thing. An Arab physician by the name of Serapion the Younger wrote about mumia being a miracle substance, and when his writings on the subject were translated, it was done so incorrectly. Instead of people believing that the substance was just the wax used in the embalming process, they interpreted it as being the mummy itself. So a bitumen craze began, and trade between Egypt and Europe boomed. They were trading mummies like Pokemon cards. I have no idea how many mummies were actually passed around, but it must have been pretty bad because finding authentic mummies got more complicated, to the point that the price of lesser mummies, like the mummies of commoners, went up. By the 16th century, the Egyptian government had enough of the grave robbing and destruction of cultural heritage sites that they finally said, no more mumia. Around this time, translators also found the error in the prior translation, and doctors stopped prescribing the grotesque substance. So gradually the craze died out. Not that it stopped people from creating fake mumia out of executed criminals and any corpse they could get their hands on. They just add some additional bitumen to the mummification process and try to pass it off as the real thing. While the 19th century was not when Egyptomania started, it really drew a wide breadth during this time. It stemmed from Napoleon's campaign in Egypt, where many scholars and scientists followed him. Upon their return, those scholars and scientists brought back information and artifacts which renewed interest in Egypt. The Victorians' Egyptomania can be found in the art, politics, science, decor, films, and books of the time. I mean, these people went crazy collecting authentic Egyptian artifacts, which unfortunately included mummies again. Their interest in Egypt is understandable. Egyptian culture is very rich. There is reason it is known as the cradle of civilization. Do you have any interesting facts about Egypt that you want to share? Comment down below, please. As if the initial mummy craze didn't already cause enough grave robbery, this next phase of mummy madness would see a renewed interest in excavation. Mummy trafficking saw a resurgence in the 19th century, but this time for a much different reason. Instead of mummy medicine, the Victorian elites and royalty started throwing mummy unwrapping parties. So basically, some half-intoxicated members of the bourgeoisie would spend the evening networking and wrapping the ancient corpse of who knows, an Egyptian royal, a priest, a chief architect, just nonchalantly unwrapping corpses that had been ceremoniously wrapped and laid to what should have been permanent rest. Some party hosts would use artifacts buried with the mummy as party favors. Most of these parties were thrown as private functions, while some were done in public. Those that were done in public would often be sold out events, and some were even used as learning opportunities in schools. Mummy Unwrappings combined the Victorians' love for the macabre with their love of science and their obsession with Egypt. I'm not here to judge, but I might get a little judgy because it really shows a lack of respect from Europeans when it comes to non-European cultures. I mean, every amateur excavation destroyed sacred tombs and historical sites that contained a wealth of information, not to mention part of the heritage of the Egyptian people. People were bringing mummies back to Europe as souvenirs, and some were placed in private collections. This was a scientific excursion for some, an opportunity to learn more about the Egyptians and the embalming process. When the bodies were unwrapped, sometimes those bandages would stick to the bones or disintegrate entirely. Sometimes bits of flesh would cling to the skeletal remains. Sometimes the skulls and bones would fall off during the process. Needless to say, these mummies were irreparably damaged by the process. At times, parts of the mummies were dispensed among partygoers to be used as charms. But we can't even talk about mummy unwrappings without talking about Thomas Pettigrew. Pettigrew was a retired surgeon turned antiquarian with a talent for showmanship. His mummy unwrapping parties were next level entertainment. Everyone was an unforgettable spectacle with unexpected situations, making the unwrapping that much more interesting. At one point, a mummy he unwrapped had sand filling the skull, and yet another was assumed to be a princess when unwrapped proved to be a gentleman. Pettigrew had such an interest in mummies that he even wrote a book called History of Egyptian Mummies. He subscribed to the pseudoscience of phrenology. Phrenology is defined by Merriam-Webster as the study of the conformation and especially the contours of the skull based on the form of belief that they are indicative of mental faculties and character. So essentially he would measure the mummies' heads to try and prove that Egyptians were Caucasian rather than African because Egyptian society was so advanced. What's science without a little racism, right? The answer is better, much better. During the Victorian era, phrenology was fairly popular, but it was disproved in the mid-1800s by renowned French physician Marie-Jeanne Pierre-Florence. The popularity of the pseudoscience died down in the early 1900s. Which, just a quick side note about Pettigrew and his xenophobia, he rented for 18 months from some headhunters the head of an indigenous Australian man. The man had rebelled against colonial rule, and as a result he was executed and his head was removed. But here's an even sicker part. He had the audacity to decorate the head with cockatoo feathers and place it on a pedestal before a painting of indigenous and colonialist people living its harmony as if that was the reality of the time. Just a quick note, if I sound a little disgusted talking about him, it's because I am. Anyway, his knowledge of mummies was renowned. He was even offered the opportunity to mummify the Duke of Hamilton when he died in 1852. After the Duke's mummification, he was in tune with an unknown Egyptian princess. Pettigrew also went on to become a co-founder for the British Archaeological Society. In 1859, Egyptologist Auguste Marley founded the ESA, or Egyptian Service for Antiquities, a group created to protect and preserve valuable pieces of Egyptian history. Combined with the power behind the ESA and other archaeologists, Egyptologists, and the Egyptian government, more actions were taken to prevent the continued desecration of Egyptian burial sites. After some time, the mummy unwrapping interest died down. It seemed that once you'd been to one unwrapping, you'd seen them all. Superstition of the time may have also contributed to the trend's decline, as grave robbing and the reanimated dead made its way into horror literature of the time. Thankfully, now excavations require permission for the Egyptian government. With today's technology, archaeologists can now glean valuable information without ever unwrapping a mummy or even opening a sarcophagus. Instead, they use high-tech scanners to get the job done, which is incredible. We get valuable information about Egyptian culture and practices without destroying an ancient person's final resting place. Those Victorians, right? Comment down below if you learned anything new. I thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care, friends.